John Solomon is probably one of the most effective and tireless investigative reporters in Washington, D.C., looking under rocks and finding the slime attached to the government. And there are a lot of rocks in this town. But now he's joined the ranks of such luminaries as Dr. Seuss and Sean Spicer. He's a children's book author, and he's joining us this evening to talk about his new effort. John, congratulations on this.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll tell you, I've done a lot of great fun things in my career that enjoy, but this one's been the most fun. Connecting with parents, connecting with children, reading stories to children, trying to find a book that conveys our values, your and my values of free speech to a new generation has been absolutely the most rewarding thing I could have ever asked for.
Well, and it's much needed because as we've had a couple of other children's book authors from the right of center political
Yeah,
spectrum on, John, and they've all sort of pointed out that this is so needed because children's books got taken over. You go to a
they
bookstore, you go
did.
to a library, and you look at the shelves, and it's all children's books written from one perspective. I mean,
That's right.
Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young were right when they said, "Teach your children well."
Yes, they did, and that was the big awakening for me. For the impetus for this book goes back a couple years ago when the censorship machinery started kicking in. They censored my Hunter Biden story. They censored the laptop story from Miranda. They censored early COVID reporting that was clearly accurate. And there was no outcry, and I was bewildered. I got to be honest with you. I was like, "Where's the outcry?" Including from our own profession. You know, our profession relies on the First Amendment. And then I started to do a little research, started to talk to some of the young reporters in my newsroom and other newsrooms, and I found out something alarming. There are 1.5 to 2 consecutive generations of young adults who went through a school system and they weren't taught the civic lessons that you and I were taught. They didn't have schoolhouse rocks. They weren't told the Bill of Rights was important. They weren't explained. It wasn't explained to them why the First Amendment was first. And in fact, some of these young adults told me they were taught in school. Their teachers told them that in some circumstances, government sanctioned censorship could be good for a larger collective. I don't know what a larger collective is. It sounds like some bad Star Trek thing. But that's the
Yeah.
things that these kids are telling me. I'm like, well, then we can't let another generation have this. And so the idea of this book is to create a visually stunning, fun story with animals and cute characters and a great storyline, but give mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle an opportunity to explain free speech, its essence to America, and why the First Amendment was first. And Brave Books made that all possible. I'm forever grateful.
Yeah, and as we've just shown some images of the books, I hope mom, dad, and grandma and grandpa and aunt and uncle and godmother and godfather recognize it is great for kids. It's got beautiful illustrations. It's called Hidden Headlines, and it follows the main character, a bloodhound investigative journalist trying to get to the bottom of a mystery. And well, I mean, it's a children's book, so we can give the spoiler. The mystery is there's censorship at play. There's some bad guys
That's
trying
right.
to stop information and the free flow of facts and ideas from all of the other people in the little animal kingdom there.
That's right. The tubes in the hamster village are clogged by an evil koala bear named Carl, who's actually modeled after Karl Marx. Yes, he is. And the tubes are the allegory for today's big tech censorship machinery. And the detective dog helps my son's hamster, Chunk. He's actually a character in our family. He's a real hamster. He was a newspaper publisher, solve the mystery and get the community warm before a big flood comes and harms everybody. And so everyone's saved at the end through free speech.
Very cool. And it's a great allegory for our times as well. So
Yeah.
stock up, get this book now. Listen, John, I'd love to talk to you about Seymour and the clues and the hidden headlines, but it's kind of a big story developing right now in town. You have
There is.
literally written the book on Joe Biden and his family's corruption. So I'd love for your response to what we learned yesterday from James Comer in the House Oversight Committee and Chuck Grassley out of the Senate. This letter to the
Yeah.
FBI about a credible whistleblower who has said that there is a credible information with regard to then Vice President Biden having a meeting with a foreign national discussing what basically is a bribery scheme, money in exchange
Yeah.
for policy.
We've been able to develop a lot more information since that story broke about 2 o'clock yesterday. So the document is known as an FD 1023. It is the document an FBI agent uses when it has an authorized contact with a confidential human source, or what you and I would call an informant. So if an informant brings in information, they write this down. Usually the informant has a credibility rating, and then it's put into the system to be investigated. And we know from our reporting last night that the country involved in this, not surprising to anyone who's covered the Hunter Biden scandal, is Ukraine. So an informant claims that there's a pay-to-play scheme, a bribery scheme, as James Comer called it, in which the vice president is allegedly trading U.S. policy for some money to his family, and it involves the country of Ukraine, and it comes from an FBI confidential human source, or i.e. informant. So we know a lot about Ukraine thanks to my 2019 reporting and then the impeachment of Donald Trump, where it became a center focus. I want to point everybody to one document I made public about a year ago because I do believe it's related to this. In 2014, in April, when Hunter Biden was just placed on the board of Burisma Holdings, the corrupt Ukraine energy company. Our own State Department called it corrupt, so that's why I'm using that term. The world didn't even know Hunter Biden had been named to the board yet. It hadn't been announced. It was going to be announced a few weeks later. But Joe Biden goes to Ukraine and he gives a speech and he says, U.S. is going to help Ukraine create natural gas independence. That's exactly the business that Burisma's in. And Hunter Biden writes his business partners who have just been at it alongside of him on the board and says, take credit for this. This shows that we added value, meaning he takes the line in his dad's speech and suggests that he got that in the speech to help Burisma. That is the sort of pay-to-play, government-to-cash concept that I think the FBI was hearing about in the spring and summer of 2020.
Added value. In other words, you hire me, you give me money, and I get things done. And that's what got done. By the way, real ironic that it was a push for natural gas in Ukraine, considering they're outlawing gas stoves here in America. But I don't want to go off on that tangent just yet. We had Congressman Pat Fallon, who sits on the Oversight Committee, on earlier in the program. He wouldn't go so far as to acknowledge that this was Ukraine, but he did say that this report to the FBI was delivered in 2020. Now, you put these pieces together, you got Burisma, you got Ukraine, you've got Biden and corruption, and you got to talk about this failed impeachment effort of Donald Trump. This is exactly the kind of thing that he was talking to the leadership in Ukraine to look into, not for political purposes, but because we're funding Ukraine and we want to make sure that that money isn't going to corrupt purposes.
That's exactly right. June 2020 is when this informant contacts the FBI and provides this information, and the report is created. That's 5 months before Americans made an informed choice, or tried to make an informed choice about the 2020 election. What are we learning about 2020? From the impeachment trial in January 2020 to November of 2020, when we ended up with that bogus letter, there was a political protection racket that was trying to keep key elements of the Biden family business schemes from the American public, depriving them, as Jim Jordan said in a recent letter, from making an informed choice. We're going to have a story in a couple of weeks showing that there are new documents that we won through lawsuits. They're going to call into question some of the testimony at the impeachment trial. We know that the letter saying the laptop was disinformation was in itself disinformation, orchestrated and facilitated by there was an effort to deceive the American people, and Joe Biden was part of it because he looked into that camera and said, I had nothing to do there. My son did nothing wrong. We now know that the Justice Department's considering indicting his son. There is a lot of revisionist history going to be written, and it's going to be better for the American people. This revision will be more accurate than the history we were given in 2020.
John Solomon, final minute here, but if this has been in the hands of the FBI, Christopher Wray, and the FBI didn't do any kind of thorough investigation to learn the credibility of this allegation, are we now venturing into the realm of cover-up as well, or obstruction of justice?
Exactly the word that many of the lawmakers coming on my show the last few days have been using, Comer and Ron Johnson. They feel like that there was a protection racket to cover up, and that could go to Merrick Garland's testimony, Blinken's testimony, to talk about that, but there's legitimate questions about the testimony he gave in 2020 that might have covered up some contacts with Hunter Biden. Yes, I think we have a dual thing. We're learning the size of the original scandal, and we're also seeing some inklings that maybe there was a cover-up to deceive the American people.
See, this is why we need great investigative journalists like Seymour Clues and his sidekick, Mr. Mouse, and I guess John Solomon from Just the News as well. You wrap it all together with your children's book, John. You see how that works?
Well done, Larry.
Great stuff. Congratulations on the book, and thank you for writing it, actually, because we do need more children's books. We got to get families the kind of content so that they can raise their kids their own way, instead of the way that we've got right now from the totalitarians in our public school systems. There's more to come on O'Connor tonight. Keep it right here. You're watching Salem News Channel.